It is time for the Rolls-Royce to finally leave us. There has been a sale that has taken, I think it's taken a month basically to complete the sale on this car. We're going to go into the details of why it took so long and why I will not be doing classic cars like this again. There it goes, off to London. Let's go back in time to before we load it up and tell you the story of why I'm not going to sell classics like that ever again. Hi everyone and welcome back to Chops Garage. Well, you've all been desperate to know what happened with the Rolls-Royce independent inspection. So it's time to fill you in. So if you are new to Chops Garage, you won't know what on earth we're talking about here, but this is the Rolls-Royce that we got from a subscriber, unfortunately under the worst circumstances. We purchased it when he was alive and he since passed away. Luckily I did get to meet him beforehand, and this is his Rolls-Royce, which was his pride and joy. The family got me in and said, you know, we'd like to clear all the cars in one go. They didn't really have the time or inclination to start doing them separately, and I said I'll buy them all up and we'll see what they go for, and then we'll sort it out at the end. So I gave him a nominal fee at the beginning, and I said once we know what all the vehicles are gone for, I'll transfer you some more money across. Now this was the big ticket item, the Rolls-Royce, and we just didn't really have any idea where its value sat. I got given such random figures, anywhere from £6,000 to £24,000. I had no idea what the car was really worth, and all I did was put one image of it on my website and say, you know, got this Rolls-Royce in, did a stock photo of one that wasn't even the same car, left it there, and I thought, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, best thing to do, put it into a classic car auction, and then the market will decide what its value was. Well, somehow in between, a gentleman called Gary found a picture of it on my website and called me about coming to see the car. Like I say, I had no intention of doing a sale that way at all. It was going to go to auction. But he said he wanted to come along from London that Saturday to come and look at the car. So he did. He turned up exactly as he said he would, 10 o'clock in the morning, and spent probably the next, I'd say, 4 to 5 hours going over the car very, very thoroughly, inside and out. I explained that for a retail sale, I'd need to go down and get it MOT'd and probably serviced. And then from that point forwards, it would be up to someone to take the car on and realise they were buying an old car and it would need work. Well, during the course of the chat, Gary explained he's actually got a number of these already. He knows them pretty well, pretty much inside out. And he's also got a few Triumph Stags himself as well. So he's used to running classic cars. And could we do something where it was kind of like a trade sale deal on it? Where he got a discount and he'd just take away and get the work done. Which we agreed a price on, a very hefty discount of £2,500 over a full retail sale, which sounds like an awful lot of money, which it is an awful lot of money, and it would fix an awful lot of stuff on the car. But again, I wanted things to move along quite quickly. One, I love the car, but I don't like the idea of it sitting around here. I don't like the idea of it getting damaged or marked up, and also I want to close stuff off with the family as well. We don't want it hanging around forever and a day. So I thought, well, at least it's going to go to a good home and he knows what he's buying. But he then asked me to get a pre-MOT done because plan was to drive it back to London. And obviously we need to make sure it's roadworthy. He's going to do a journey like that. So we popped it down to the garage. Obviously he went back off to London. I subsequently took it down to Moore's garage, who did the MOT. When the MOT came back, the Moore said in order to pass an MOT, it would need the washer fluid motor for the washers to be done. That's all they said it needed to be done. Advisories were a bit of a leak from the crossover pipe in the engine bay, exhaust leak. I think a bit of a play in a bushing. I think that was it. Nothing for rot at all. It went through emissions fine, even though it's got a slightly bad idle, I'd say at the moment, which is another thing that needs sorting out for retail. It will probably need a service with leads and plugs, which I guess could add up quite quickly. So nothing outrageous. So I got hold of Gary. I let Gary know that that's all it needed for the MOT. So it was safe to drive it back if we got the washer motor fluid changed out on it. But Gary then asked, could he have an independent inspection on the vehicle? He wanted to take it down to a specialist at Exeter and have them do an independent inspection. At which point a lot of you guys say I should bail on the deal. Because your viewpoint was that it was too big an ask for someone that was effectively getting the car at its trade value rather than its retail value to ask that to be done. But I'm fairly laid back,
And I thought, well, in the day, I would be interested to see what an independent, because, you know, if I am going to get the top money for it, what do I need to do to get the top money for it? And it was being done at Gary's cost, not mine. He was paying for the transport. So again, I was just interested because in this industry, as you go along, you learn as you go along. And if I were to sort of retail anything like this again, sell classic cars, I need to know what potential I could be in for. Because on the face of it, the car looks fantastic. And obviously the MOT came back with nothing outrageous. But what is an actual specialist going to say? Because so often as a dealer, what happens is you'll sell a car like this with a fresh MOT on it. And then the very next thing someone will do is go and get an inspection done after the sale and then get back onto you and hammer you for a load of stuff they want you to fix, even though the car's obviously gone out being roadworthy. The specialists are going to pick these cars absolutely apart. You know they are going to, because from their point of view, they may be somebody that restores these cars, and they'll give you a great long list of nice-to-haves. An MOT is what does it need to be safe and roadworthy. An inspection by an independent inspector who restores these kind of things is based on what would I do to get this car up to the kind of condition I'd personally want it to be in, which is different, I think, we'd all accept from what, you know, where a dealer needs the vehicle to be. A dealer needs to make sure it's correctly described. They need to allow someone the opportunity to get their inspections done, and they need to make sure it's roadworthy and safe when it leaves their premises. They don't need to restore the car to new for you, and they don't need to do things that necessarily are just a nice to have rather than be a safety issue. So we've now since spoken to Gary since the report was done, and they have come back with over £5,000 worth of work they would want to do to the vehicle as it stands now. Now, obviously, that's not a restoration, but that is stuff they would like to do. So should we go through what they said they would do? Firstly, the slightly bad running of the carburetors. It's okay when it's warmed up. When it's cold, it's slightly bad running. They wanted to strip down the carburetor, clean it out, put it back together again at a cost, I believe it was, of £600. Let me get my sheet to make sure I'm... No, sorry, to be fair, £500 plus the VAT. When they took the car off of Adrian and went to pull it in, the car struggled to start for a second. They turned it on again and it started again. They decided that the starter motor was bad. Now, I have to say, never had a problem with the car starting here. Adrian didn't have a problem loading up. Adrian didn't have a problem loading it off again. I moved it in here and it started on the button. But they quoted £986 plus VAT for a starter motor. £986. Now, I did have a quick look online. I found starter motors for this for about £350. I don't know if that includes the fitting as well and how much work is involved in doing that. So next thing they wanted to do was the balance pipe for the exhaust, which I said was one of the things noted as an advisor in the MOT. That was £230, so not outrageous. They then flagged that the tyres are overaged. So obviously the tyres have a date on them, and these tyres are over 10 years old, and they'd want to change all the tyres all the way around, which they quoted £760 plus VAT for. I found these tyres this size on a budget tyre for £90 each. Obviously, there's fitting involved, but that did seem slightly high on that price. But again, it depends what quality of rubber you want to put on the car, I guess. They noted that the brake pipes had some corrosion to them. No, sorry, some cracking, they thought, to some of the rubber. They'd like to change those out as well at a cost of £263 plus VAT. So our MOT tester didn't fail it for that or advise for that. He seemed happy enough with them. So again, I kind of see that as a nice to have. Tyres, I don't know, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you wouldn't really want to run overaged tyres. It's safety wise, you should have newer tyres, but obviously they are 100% correct tread and they seem to be holding air. Whether you view that as a nice to have or as an essential, I don't know. What do we have then? We had fuel pipes, which they advised had some light corrosion to the fuel pipes. Again, not flagged in the MOT, but they would advise changing them. Even Gary said, to be honest, based on what they're saying about them, having looked at them underneath, they could just be wire brushed down and given a coat of paint. They'll be right. They're not actually pitting and they're not actually leaking. So again, you could consider that as a nice to have. I say balance the carbs at 500. And then they said it had a leaking steering rack. Now, I've been underneath this car. I would say there was no leaks at all. When it was being MOT tested, there was no leaks at all. Nothing was hitting the ground. Nothing was coming out as we ran the car. So I would imagine that refers to to weeping seals, I would say, rather than actual full-blown leaks. So obviously there's a difference between something that's full-blown leaking and something that is weeping slowly, which is what you expect on an old car with old seals on it. But for that repair alone, they wanted £1,100 plus VAT for that. They found a ball joint, which apparently is £650 for a ball joint. Most expensive ball joint I've ever seen in my life. Again, we didn't flag that in the MOT, I don't think. And they wanted to flush all the brake fluid at £170, which in my mind is a servicing item. So that's something you should expect to do on a car, especially if you're buying it almost on a trade basis. That's kind of like just maintenance, isn't it? Something you should be doing yourself. So all in all, that was just basically just short of £5,000 plus the VAT. So £6,000 they wanted to, they say, to get it up to a basic standard they'd want the car to be at. £6,000 on a car that would pass an MOT currently just for a washer fluid motor. Now, obviously, I'm not having to dig at that garage at all. They're a specialist. They obviously charge specialist pricing. They obviously like to use genuine or parts that they know and trust to be of good quality. And obviously, they've got a standard. Their job was to pick the car apart and tell him what they thought it needed, which they've done. The question is, had I sold the car at full price and the customer had gone away and had this review done, how many of those items do you feel I would have been on the hook for? Because I say that's what normally happens, is someone would buy the car, then go and get the independent inspection, then ring me and tell me I was a terrible car dealer because the car needed £5,000 worth of work. That's what normally happens in these scenarios. But how much of that work would you say, if the car went out the door with a valid MOT, would someone be liable for if they bought the car at full price? Now, bear in mind, if you bought the car with a £2,500 discount, how much of that £6,000 worth of work would you feel that I was liable for, or that you should be further knocking me down by? Now, Gary's request was that I reduce the price point by another £2,000 to contribute towards these repairs. During our conversation, he agreed with me that there were a number of things there, like, for example, the starter motor that neither of us had experienced any problems with all the times he'd moved the car in and out, weren't necessarily a required repair. He noted himself, and I say Gary's been perfectly reasonable through the whole process, that the brake pipes are something he could do himself at home. The brake fluid flush was standard maintenance. There were things that we agreed on. The tyres, I kind of felt probably was a safety issue, so I thought that was a fair chip. But again, I had already allowed £2,500 off of the actual asking price for the car to get that kind of work done. The balancing of the carbs, I knew needed doing. The leak from the exhaust, I knew needed doing. The bearing that had a bit of play in it, I think we know needed doing. I had no idea it would be anywhere near that expensive. There are a few other things like the temperature gauge wasn't working and the central locking wasn't working, something I'd never tested myself. So there were a few bits and bobs. Now, in my mind, the asking price I was asking for the vehicle, I would have expected the central locking to work. I'd expected the temperature gauge to work. I'd expected to put on tyres so that they weren't overage. I'd expected to balance the carbs. I'd expected to replace the exhaust connector and other things. So I could have easily been a couple of £1,000 into doing those things quite comfortably to get it to the full spec of retail that it would need to be at. So is the discount I gave too big? No, probably bang on, and then minus, like I say, another £500 for less hassle. So I think that's pretty fair. But then we go into whether any further discount was due or not. And the remaining things, I think, to be honest, probably a lot of them were nice to haves and they weren't absolutely essential. And yeah, so it was a difficult one. But went back and forth with Gary a few times and did agree a further £1,000 off the vehicle for him to take it away as it stands right now. Now, some of you will be in the comments thinking that's far too much. Some of you will be thinking it's fair enough. Some of you have your opinion. Some of you will think I never would have got the full asking price for this vehicle in the first place, which is another valid point. It could be that I may never have got the full asking price for it, even if I did spend an extra £2,000 on doing all of the repairs. Would I ever have got the full asking price for the car in the first place? Well, that's debatable as well. Could it have gone to auction and just bombed out, or could it have gone to auction and a couple of people fought it out? I think at the end of the day, it's one of those birds in the hand situation. We've got Gary, who's a serious buyer. He spent £700 or more invested in getting the vehicle checked out, transported, coming down to himself. He knows what he's buying. He's now had a pre-MOT. He's now had a pre-purchase inspection, and he's had an inspection himself for over 4 hours. He's never been prevented from looking at any component of the vehicle he likes. So I'm quite confident selling to him as an as-is status as well, because I don't think there could be any comeback on this vehicle at all where he said it was misdescribed, didn't know what he was buying, or had a fault that he didn't know about. So that's what we've settled on. It's still got to be picked up yet, which obviously means I'm still babying around it at the moment. What have I learned from this process? I've learned that selling higher end, more expensive classic cars is very time consuming, very laborious, and is not as easy as selling Hyundai i10s for £3,000, that's for sure. And Sam over at Southern Classics gave me a lot of advice that it would be this scenario. It's certainly not an easy game to be in. People are buying with their hearts. They don't have to have this vehicle. It's not essential transport for them, so they aren't necessarily in any hurry to make a decision. They're very cautious because these cars can obviously end up with huge repair bills. And pricing these cars is so hard because there's no real guide. It all comes down to condition. It comes down to provenance. It comes down to mileage. It's a really, really tough one. And it'd be lovely to have cars like this around. But I think based on my experience with this one, that... yeah, I'm not sure I'd do it again. I'm not sure. I think I probably would send them to auction. In terms of pricing one up, if someone came to me again and said, James, what do you think it's worth? What would you buy it off me for? I'm still none the wiser. I'm still none the wiser whether this was a good deal or a bad deal, whether I undersold it or whether I oversold it. So if someone offered me another one tomorrow, I wouldn't have any idea where to go with it at all. If I was to do classics, I think I would stick to simpler stuff, like the rough and ready sort of classics I've got here, where they're no concours cars, just make them roadworthy and safe, and they're affordable, and make it, not such a lot of money potentially that someone's investing. And the trouble, as I've said before, and this is the biggest problem, is there's nothing written in law that differentiates between someone buying this car and someone going and buying a brand new Rolls-Royce in terms of the way the Consumer Rights Act works. It's got an allowance there for age, mileage, but there's just nothing in black and white that tells you exactly where you stand on it. So I've sent a document over to Gary for him to agree as a sale contract, and that contract says that the vehicle is sold without MOT, so shouldn't be considered roadworthy, that he has been allowed to do an independent inspection on the vehicle, that it is sold as is, and that any future repairs on the vehicle are at his responsibility, not at mine. So I've sent that document across and had him agree with those terms as part of the sale process. Because as we've already discussed, he's entirely aware of what repairs the vehicle might need. He's had a very long test drive in the car as well. He could literally not be described as somebody that doesn't know exactly what they're buying. He knows exactly what he's buying, and I'm very confident if under some unbelievable set of circumstances we ended up in a courtroom, I don't think there's a judge on the planet would say that the customer know exactly what they were buying and given every single opportunity to check the vehicle over, and that was accommodated, and also had a massive discount versus what the original asking price of the car was. Like I said, I'm very grateful that Gary got the inspection done before purchase, because too often you hear stories of where people agree a deal with the car, take a car away, and then get an independent inspection done, and then want a dealer to basically restore the car for free because they've taken it to a specialist who, understandably, is going to pull the car apart and want to replace every component that looks even half worn on it. I mean, the very type of specialists that do that would never restore a car and sell it because they know it isn't financially viable to do so. You don't see them completely restoring cars and then selling them unless they're incredibly valuable cars, because they know that it isn't financially viable to do that and make money doing it. If the specialist you're going to isn't selling you fully restored cars for the price point that you're about to buy the car at, don't expect a fully restored car at that price point. It's not going to happen. That's how you need to look at it logically. So for me, my experience of selling classics so far is I don't think I'd do it. I don't expect that anybody else probably would have been any less detail orientated than Gary was with buying the car. I fully expect anyone that came to see it would be. And you just haven't got the time on the kind of margin you'd make on one of these. I mean, God, if I was selling these, the margin I'd need to have in them, holy moly. The margin I'd need to have in this car to make all of that worthwhile and the potential risk going forwards, it wouldn't stack up. All my hats off to Sam at Southern Classics and all the rest of the people that are doing classic cars, because I don't know how that really stacks up. I don't know how, one, they've got the patience and how they get their cars cheap enough to make it worthwhile doing. They must be very, very canny buyers. I would probably do perhaps the sort of lower end of the market where classics are under $5,000, like I do on other stuff. And then you could be a bit brutal, wouldn't you, about the condition of it, and just get an MOT put on it and said, right, it's MOT'd, it's roadworthy, that's it. From this point onwards, you're on your own, you fix it up. But when people are spending considerably more money than that, I think I can imagine this process is fairly standard along the way. So yeah, I won't. Beautiful car. Really loved the opportunity to have it, to experience it, to look round it, and glad it's going to a really good home as well. And I know our subscriber would have been pleased that it was going to a good home. But would I offer to try and help sell cars for people again at this kind of age? No, I'd run a bloody mile. And like I say, I don't think really I'm any the wiser from my experience with this as to if I was offered another one again as to where I'd need to be price point on it. And we experienced this with the Jeep recently as well, didn't we? The Jeep I did and sold at a loss. I said in that video, if I was going forwards and people offer me classics, I'm going to be literally cutting them off at the knees. Whatever I think the retail value is going to be, I'm going to be wanting massive margins, $5,000-6,000 margins or more to make it worthwhile versus the risk. It's a bit like doing Range Rovers and Jaguar Land Rover products and sports cars, like what my friend Rob over at Cubit does. You've just got to have such a huge margin it's worthwhile, because some of the cars you're not going to make a lot on, and others you need to be lucky and run away with it. And on this basis, I think that's probably why the Barchetta is worth just sticking in auction and seeing where it lands. And I could end up making nothing. I could end up breaking even. I could end up losing some. I could end up making some. Who knows? Realistically, the most profitable thing would be to retail it. But again, the process of that seems a bit laborious versus just getting in more little cars that are going to retail under $5,000 that people come along and take for a little test drive. It's going to be their daily. They don't have days on end to make their decision. They're going to go for a little spin. They're going to check the fresh MOT, looks all good on it, and the bodywork's okay. And then they're just going to buy it, get off, and go and use it every day, and not want to bring it back to its absolute peak condition, and not be quite as much driven by their heart as you might be buying a classic.
Just before I go, must let you know, Topdon jump packs are on special offer again. If you watch the channel regularly, you'll know these things save my hide time and time again. Whether it be I need my phone charging so I can film, or whether I need to jump start a completely dead car, these are the best jump packs out there. And currently, the JS 2000 is on offer with 15% off. But that only lasts to the 23rd of February. So I'll put a link in the video description down below. Make sure you go and grab one while they're on offer. You need a Topdon jump pack in your life. Absolutely brilliant bits of kit. As I said, they'll not only start your cars for you, but they've all got ports on them that allow you to charge other devices like your mobile phone while you're out and about. There's just 1,000,001 uses for them. Absolutely fantastic bits of kit. So I said, hurry, get to that link down below because they sell out super quickly.